I didn't realize my life was breaking until the silence in my house started to feel louder than any argument we had ever had. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because the tea had gone cold in my hands, and the clock on the wall kept ticking like it was trying to remind me time doesn't stop for anyone. That was the morning I understood something was deeply wrong. Before that, my life had always been simple, not perfect, but steady. I had been married for 17 years. My husband, Khalid, was not a man of many words, but he had routines, predictable ones. He came home at 6:30, placed his keys in the same bowl, and asked for tea before even taking off his shoes. And I built my world around those small, quiet habits. Our home smelled of cumin and fresh roti most evenings. The television hummed in the background, and even in silence, there was comfort. I used to believe that stability meant safety, but looking back now, I realize it was just familiarity. The first change was so small I almost ignored it. Khalid stopped asking for tea. That might sound foolish to you, but when someone has followed the same pattern for nearly 2 decades, even the smallest break in rhythm feels like a crack in the foundation. "Did you already have tea?" I asked one evening, trying to keep my tone light. He didn't look at me. "Not hungry," he said. Not hungry. Those 2 words sat between us like strangers, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living with someone I didn't fully know. I told myself I was overthinking, but deep down, something had already started to shift, and I wasn't ready for what was coming next. It's strange how the heart notices things long before the mind is willing to accept them. After that evening, I began to see more, or maybe I stopped ignoring what had always been there. Khalid started coming home later, not drastically, just enough to feel different. 7 o'clock, then 7:30. One night it was almost 9. Each time he had a reason ready, placed carefully on his tongue like something rehearsed. Work was busy. Traffic was bad. Had to meet someone. Someone. That word lingered longer than it should have. I remember standing in the kitchen one night, stirring a pot of lentils that had already begun to stick at the bottom. The smell turned slightly bitter, but I didn't move. My mind was elsewhere, replaying his tone, his pauses, the way he avoided my eyes. 17 years teaches you a person's language, not just their words, but their silences. And Khalid started speaking in silence. One evening, his phone buzzed while he was in the shower. I didn't mean to look, at least that's what I told myself. But the screen lit up, and there it was, a name I didn't recognize. No message preview, just a single word. Reached. My fingers hovered over the phone. My chest felt tight, like something inside me already knew the answer I wasn't ready to face. I could have unlocked it. I knew his passcode. It had never changed, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped back, as if distance could protect me from the truth. When he came out, I simply said, "Your phone rang." He nodded, picked it up, and walked into the other room without a word. That night, we ate dinner in silence, and for the first time, the food had no taste. I lay awake long after he fell asleep, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. And I realized something that would become one of the hardest lessons of my life. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in fragments, quietly asking if you're ready to see it. And I wasn't. Not yet. The truth didn't knock on my door. It slipped in, quietly, like it had always belonged there. A week later, Khalid told me he had a work dinner. He didn't say where, didn't say with whom, just a short sentence spoken while adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror. I watched him from the bed. "You didn't tell me about it earlier," I said, keeping my voice calm. He shrugged. "It just came up." Just came up. 17 years, and suddenly I was no longer part of his day. That night, something inside me refused to stay still. I don't know if it was instinct or self-respect finally waking up after years of quiet obedience, but I followed him. I told myself I only needed clarity, that I wasn't doing anything wrong, that a wife has the right to understand the distance growing inside her own home. The restaurant wasn't far, a small place tucked between brighter, louder ones, the kind of place you choose when you don't want to be seen. I stood outside for a moment, my hands trembling slightly. Then I stepped in. The smell of grilled meat and strong spices filled the air, but I barely noticed. My eyes scanned the room, heart pounding so loudly I thought someone might hear it. And then I saw him, Khalid, sitting across from a woman. She was laughing, softly, comfortably, like she had every right to be there, like she knew him in ways I suddenly realized I didn't anymore. He leaned forward, his expression lighter than I had seen in months. That's what broke me. Not the woman, not even the lie, but the ease. The version of him I thought had disappeared was sitting right there, across from someone else. I don't remember walking toward them. I only remember my voice, steady, almost unfamiliar. Khalid. Both of them looked up. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. And in that moment, without a single explanation, I understood everything. For a moment, no one spoke. The clinking of cutlery, the low hum of conversations around us, it all continued, as if the world had decided my pain did not deserve an interruption. Khalid stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Let me explain," just that. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man I had shared 17 years with, and for the first time I noticed how easily he stood on the other side of me. "I think that's my question," I replied quietly. The woman beside him shifted uncomfortably. She looked between us, her confidence fading, replaced with something more cautious, more aware. "I didn't know," she started. Khalid cut her off. "It's not what you think." I almost smiled. Not out of humor, but disbelief. Because in that moment I realized something, another hard lesson I had never wanted to learn. When someone says, "It's not what you think," it almost always is. "Then tell me what it is," I said, my voice calm but firm. He hesitated. That hesitation was louder than any confession. "I was going to tell you," he finally muttered. I nodded slowly. "When?" No answer. Of course. The truth doesn't hide in words. It hides in the spaces where answers should be. I turned to the woman. She couldn't meet my eyes now. "How long?" I asked her gently. She swallowed. "A few months." A few months. I repeated those words in my mind, letting them settle, letting them hurt. Because betrayal isn't just about what someone does. It's about all the moments you lived, not knowing you were already being replaced. I looked back at Khalid. "You didn't lose me today," I said softly. His eyes flickered. "You lost me the moment you decided I didn't deserve the truth." And with that, I turned and walked away. Not because I was strong, but because I finally understood something I wish I had learned years ago. Some lessons don't come to save your relationship. They come to save you. That night, I didn't cry. And that scared me more than anything else. I sat at the edge of my bed, still in the same clothes, my dupatta loosely hanging from one shoulder. The house felt unfamiliar, like it had quietly chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. Khalid came home late. I heard the door open, the soft clink of his keys in that same bowl, the same routine, as if nothing had changed. but everything had. He stood at the bedroom door for a moment before speaking. "We need to talk." I didn't look at him. "You should have thought about that before." There was a pause. Heavy. Careful. "It's complicated," he said. I let out a slow breath. "No," I replied, finally turning to face him. "It's actually very simple. You lied." His jaw tightened. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." That sentence, I had heard it before, not from him, but in stories, in whispers, in the quiet warnings women give each other, but rarely believe will apply to them. "Nothing ever means to happen like this," I said calmly, "but it still does." He sat down across from me, running his hands over his face like a tired man. "I was unhappy," he admitted. Those words landed differently, not because they justified anything, but because they revealed something deeper, something I had ignored for years. "Why didn't you say that?" I asked. He didn't answer. And in that silence, I learned another hard lesson. People don't always communicate when they're unhappy. They escape. Sometimes into work, sometimes into silence, and sometimes into someone else. "I'm not here to fight," I said quietly. "I just need honesty, for once." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "I don't know what I want anymore," he confessed. I nodded slowly, because for the first time that night, I did. And what I wanted was peace. The next morning, the sun rose just like it always did. Soft light slipped through the curtains, touching the same walls, the same furniture, the same life that no longer felt like mine. Khalid had already left. No goodbye, no conversation, just absence. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the stove. Out of habit, I reached for the tea leaves, then stopped. For 17 years, my mornings had begun with his routine. That day, I made tea only for myself, and somehow it tasted different. Not better, not worse, just honest. By afternoon, the calls began. My sister had heard. I still don't know how news travels so fast, but pain has a way of finding an audience before you're ready to speak about it. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I took a deep breath. "Yes." There was silence on the other end, followed by anger. "How could he do this to you?" I closed my eyes. That question, it sounds simple, but it rarely has a simple answer. "Because he could," I said quietly. "Not because I wasn't enough, not because I failed, but because somewhere along the way, he made a choice." And that was another lesson I had to accept. Closure doesn't always come from understanding why someone hurt you. Sometimes it comes from accepting that they did. Over the next few days, more people found out. Relatives, neighbors, even people I barely spoke to. Some offered sympathy, some offered advice, and some offered judgment disguised as concern. "Maybe you should try to fix it. Think about your years together. Men make mistakes." I listened to all of it, calmly, politely, but inside, something had already settled. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about what others expected of me. I was thinking about what I could live with. And I knew one thing for certain. I could live with starting over. But I could not live with staying where I was no longer respected. The day I packed my things, the house was unbearably quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet I once loved, but the kind that echoes, reminding you of everything that used to live inside it. I folded my clothes slowly, carefully, Not because I needed time, but because each piece carried a memory I hadn't yet decided how to feel about. The blue shawl he had once brought me from a work trip. The dinner set we picked together after our 10th anniversary. Even the curtains, I'd chosen those on a rainy afternoon while he complained about the traffic. 17 years, reduced to objects that suddenly felt heavier than they should. Khalid stood by the door, watching. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. I paused, holding a stack of clothes in my hands. "I already did," I replied. He stepped forward, his voice softer now, almost uncertain. "We can fix this." I looked at him, and for a moment I saw the man I had once trusted. But trust is a fragile thing. It doesn't break loudly. It shatters quietly. And once it's gone, you don't rebuild it with promises. You rebuild it with truth, something he had already spent. "This isn't about fixing," I said gently. "It's about accepting." He frowned. "Accepting what?" I took a breath. "That we are no longer the people we used to be." The words didn't come from anger. They came from clarity. And clarity is a painful kind of peace. Later that evening, I walked out of that house with a single suitcase. No drama, no shouting, no tears. Just a quiet ending to something that had once been my entire world. In the weeks that followed, I began rebuilding my life in small, almost invisible ways. I rearranged my mornings. I started cooking only what I liked. I learned how to sit in silence without feeling empty. And slowly, I understood something that no one teaches you early enough. Losing someone else can hurt, but losing yourself hurts far more. And I had finally chosen not to lose myself again. It's been a year now. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, expecting to hear the familiar sound of keys at the door. But then I remember, some chapters don't return, no matter how quietly you wait for them. And that's okay, because the hardest lessons I learned, the ones that broke me at first, they also rebuilt me into someone stronger, calmer, and more honest with herself. So tell me, if you were in my place, would you have stayed and tried to fix it? Or would you have chosen yourself, like I did? I'll be here reading your thoughts.